welcome to this first Fringe panel of the day about building alliances for better protecting the rule of law and civic space in the EU. I'm Valerie Hopkins, the Southeast Europe correspondent of the Financial Times for one more day, and I'm thrilled here to discuss rule of law, fundamental rights, and a space for civil liberties with our fantastic panel. These are increasingly at the center of divisive political and legal debates in the EU as they come under increasing pressure in many member states. This panel is going to look beyond the legal and political instruments available to strengthen the rule of law and focus on the supporting architecture for strengthening the rights protections of European citizens. We have a fabulous panel from a broad array of backgrounds in politics, academia, and activism, who I believe will share their experiences within national human rights institutions, EU institutions, civil society, and the Ivory Tower to discuss how transnational initiatives can and should cooperate more effectively to protect and promote civic space. This is a great time to discuss not only what has happened, but how people are working together and what more resources are needed for the future. This event is connected to the Recharging Advocacy for Rights in Europe project that seeks to empower 25 European human rights NGOs, which is co-organized by one of our panelists, Márta, Pardavi. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the panel. We have Gwendoline Delbos Corfield, a member of European Parliament and the Vice President of the Greens in the European Parliament, Adam Bodnar, the Polish ombudsperson, Laurent Pech, the head of the Law and Politics Department of Middlesex University London, and Márta Pardavi, the co-chair of the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, who's an initiator of the project, as I mentioned, and a current policy leader fellow at the EUI School of Transnational Governance. So without further ado, I think we can start with Ms. Delbos Corfield. I want to ask you about what kind of architecture already exists in Brussels, especially in the European Parliament, to protect the rule of law. And what new resources do you see available to assist civil society? Thanks.
Hello. So, of course, rule of law has not always been the core problematic of European institutions. They were for a very long time much more worried about the state of the market, of course, and having a solid money and all sorts of problems that were inherent to goods and traveling of goods. And then, of course, with a bit of this assumption that European Union was an alliance of democratic countries that had vowed to follow the values of European Union, and there would be no problem as from this moment, and we would never come back, and there will be no backsliding. And then when backsliding started, of course, there was a bit of a concern about what should be done. And the narrative that comes out is often that they seem to be a powerless European Union and powerless institutions with no tools. And this is in fact not true at all. Tools have been foreseen, tools do exist. And in exactly the same way that you can go after a member state because he's not cooperating in the competition rules, or it's not obeying some environmental directives and all this, you can ask member states to come back in the European Union rule of law frame. And of course, the most logical tools are the infringement procedures. These are to be launched by the Commission against member states that are not applying very clear rules of the European Union in matters of judiciary, in matters of discriminations, in matters of peace, and freedom of media and all of this. And these infringement procedures have barely been actioned by the Commission since the beginning of backslidings in a number of member states. It is not because they're not aware, because there's a huge work of civil society, citizens, scholarship like Laurent Pech, members of the parliament. A lot of people are alerting on very specific situations, giving them exactly the precise details they could use to do these infringement procedures. And there's also the ground, the basis, the legal ground for it. But they don't do it because they always say that they could not afford to lose a case. So they instead wait on civil society and others to go to do the process themselves in front of the European Court of Justice. Now, to show that they're not doing anything, they have been starting to invent a number of soft laws, what we call soft laws. So they've got this idea in the council, for example, of doing a peer review of the state of the rule of law in every member state, which help them to give the impression they're discussing about it, but this comes with no concrete actions and risk constraint. Then the Commission issued this first report on the rule of law, the state of the rule of law in all the European Union. There again, it's only a report. It doesn't come with anything else behind. We can hope that it will one day. And it has the importance of being a good symbol. The fact that the European Union now have this rule of law report shows that it's become a very important issue, but it's still once again, it's a report and it doesn't come with action. Then you've got another tool, which is supposedly a very strong tool, but a very difficult one to use. That is the Article 7 process. So you will, if you consider that a member state has really, really gone too far on a number of issues, then you could issue an Article 7 process against this member state. This has been the case against the government of Poland and the government of Holland. In each case, in one case, it's Parliament that did it, and in the other one, it's Commission. But there again, it means that once you've launched it, it doesn't stay in the air. You need to act on it. Acting means making hearings of the two member states and having all the other member states understanding and acknowledging what is happening, and then coming with recommendations to this member state. And there again, the council is not doing these hearings. It did it once only. It never came back to doing new ones. And of course, the idea of doing recommendations seems completely awful to most of the member states. So we could be stuck there again. And then they invented a new tool recently. There again, could be an interesting tool if it's used. It's only a complementary tool to all the others, which is the tool of the rule of law conditionality mechanism. This one is to say that if European money is misused, notably in the rule of law area, then you could sanction these member states and not giving any more some part of the money, which is the cohesion fund money. There again, very difficult tool to be triggered because you have to show that there's been a problem with rule of law. The money that you are refusing to the member states needs to be very clearly linked to this rule of law problem, but it does exist. It has been accepted. But there again, now when you discuss with the DG Finance of the DG Budget of the Commission, they will tell you that they wonder how they're going to use it. It's going to be very difficult. They're not sure and all this. So there again, there's a lot of pressure to be put. So if I was to conclude on all these tools, they exist. We will hear our other speakers, but I think most of the scholarship, the civil society, the people that are knowledgeable on this will tell you that the toolbox is now complete. It has all the aspects that you need. Now we need to use the toolbox, and that is a very different issue. This is a political and courageous issue. It needs member state and commission to want to act, and this is where we are now blocked. And in all of this, of course, to answer the first of your questions, it is in a very close and everyday collaboration with civil society and with all the others that you will do it, because it means that you need to know what is happening on the ground, and this is done. Civil society is bringing back this information. Now it needs to be used, and then you need to empower civil society also to fight against what is happening. This is also a subtopic that is advancing, because more and more you have programs coming from the European Union that will empower civil society, and we hope to do even more on that part. I think I will stop for now on this first introduction and come back to the questions later.
Great. Thank you so much for that excellent introduction. I think we can move to Mr. Bodnar, and I would like to ask you, as the head of a national human rights institution, where has transnational cooperation been valuable for you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for making this this event and inviting me to talk about those issues. I'm in this very specific moment because for more than 5 last years, I was dealing with the rule of law crisis in Poland, but also shrinking space for civil society. And at the same time, I tried to do everything what was possible in order to defend the independence of my institution, which is the Ombudsman institution. And I think one of the most important aspects of all of this experience of last years is this transnational cooperation and transnational network, because it seems to me that in many cases, thanks to this cooperation, we could maybe not stop the process, but at least we could delay the process of implementation of those negative reforms to the rule of law and human rights in Poland. That some of those networks and some of those methods of cooperation proved to be really important and successful, or at least they gave a hope for the future. And in my opinion, they still give a hope for the future. And I still believe that Poland is not the lost case, and maybe we'll be able to use that kind of methods of cooperation for the advantage of the Polish democratic cause, but also to the advantage of other parts of Europe. But just let me be quite specific. First of all, my position as the Ombudsman. I have a pretty strong, independent, constitutional position, but over this time, there were a number of threats or number of attempts to delegitimize the institution or to cut the budget or even to dismiss me from this position. And I can say that what was really important, that I could always count on all those transnational networks of ombudsman institutions. International Ombudsman Institution, which is working on the global scale. I could count on European network of national human rights institutions, which is like the umbrella organization for all NHRIs in Europe. I could count also on Equinet, which is the network of equality bodies, and also on the European network of ombudsmen, which is coordinated by European Ombudsman Emily O'Reilly. So there were a number of statements, number of position papers, number of visits, and like a good feeling of solidarity, and it seems to me that it helped me to be stronger. Simply that I could always refer, listen, I'm just one of many institutions, and my friends from other countries are defending me, and they are presenting the argument why the independence of this institution is important from the democratic point of view. And I think one of the important lessons from this period is that we should do everything what is possible at the EU level to strengthen national human rights institutions and especially equality bodies. Please note that with respect to equality bodies, there is a legal room for this, which is stemming from Article 19 of the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union. There is a room for going forward with strengthening equality bodies, and I think that should be one of the objectives of the EU, of the Commission in upcoming years. The second point is this fight for rule of law, because of course I support and I cooperate with Polish judges that are fighting for judicial independence. Even today we have another important case, the case of Włodzimierz Wróbel, one of the most prominent judges, professor of law, the former candidate for the president of the Supreme Court, and he's right now, just today, facing the hearing before the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court. Really horrible thing that kind of case happens. But please note, Polish judges over this time have managed not only just to say that, our position should be protected, but they have also managed to create important networks of cooperation with other judicial associations from other member states, with MEDEL, which is this Association of European Judges, with the International Association of Judiciary, but also importantly with the European Network of Councils of Judiciary. And there were a number of statements, positions, but also very much symbolic acts. So the most symbolic moment for Polish judiciary, but also for the Polish, I think for the European civil society, was last January of 2020, when we had in Warsaw so-called March of 1,000 Gowns. So please imagine, representatives of judiciaries from all EU member states, but also from such countries like Norway, being present in Warsaw and marching together with EU and Polish and national flags together. That was extremely symbolic moment, I think, not just for Poland, but for the European integration. But please note, it is not just about cooperation in terms of exchanging standards and just giving a feeling that they are all European judges, but also it is taking advantage of some methods of argumentation. So it was a little bit coupled with different activities, putting a pressure on EU authorities to do real actions. So, for example, all those infringement actions by the Commission would not happen if not the cooperation if not the pressure given by the Polish judges. But also, and I would like here to underline the cooperation with scholar community. And, Professor Laurent Pech, who is with us here today, he became a little bit like a symbol of this scholar community in Poland, because he was also like individually targeted in Poland for his involvement in Polish issues. But he and his colleagues created a huge network supporting Polish lawyers and judges in bringing preliminary references or pushing for infringement actions. And I think it was extremely important from the point of view of saving things in Poland. And the last point I would like to say is like a general civil society. Please note that such organizations like Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, they had always this good cooperation. There is this organization, umbrella organization like the Civil Liberties Union, operating at the EU level. But also, we had some new actors in this field. So I really appreciate activity of Rafto Foundation. Rafto Foundation from Bergen and Iver Orstevik became extremely valuable player in this fight for the Polish judiciary. But also such people like Gerald Knaus and his colleagues from the European Stability Initiative, and they have managed to do like one additional thing. So they could move the whole discussion not from a technical point of view to a very strong political messaging. Why, for example, you have to deal with the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court? Why the whole disciplinary system for judges is negative from the point of view of rights? Why it should matter politicians, not only in Poland, but also in other EU member states? And I think that this whole experience is giving, in my opinion, a chance that in case of any other problem of that nature happening in other member state, and I can imagine that because of this politics of identity trend or national populism trend, it may happen. I think that we know already, and we know how those structures work and what could be effective and what is not. If autocrats are playing according to a certain playbook, I think the civil society also should have this ability to play according to the playbook of responding to a threat and supporting each other using those transnational networks of cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bodnar. And thank you for providing a very nice segue into our third speaker, Professor Pech. You are an incredibly outspoken academic. You started a group of advocates called the Good Lobby Profs, right? Was it hard to get people on board? Would you suggest to have other communities joining you, or do you think that it's really important to have a very specific kind of professorial academic community? And do you see, why do you think it's so important to engage as an academic rather than being an impartial observer?
I would have to disagree with the last assumption that you cannot be actively engaged in a public debate and stop being impartial. So I would have to disagree with these assumptions quite strongly. But just I understand what you mean, because it's quite often argued that a scholar cannot participate to public debates. But then those people arguing this are just completely forgetting the concept of public intellectual, which is in a way what scholars are supposed to be doing. Plus, actually, scholars now are expected to show evidence of impact on public debates. So what we are doing is in fact what is expected of modern academics. But just to come back to the good lobby profs, so perhaps a bit of background, because it's a culmination of many years of frustration with both the EU and the Council of Europe when it comes to the dismantling of the rule of law and democracy. So long story short, our diagnosis, just not only mine, but the diagnosis of many other professors, especially law professors, is that both the EU and the Council have failed us. They have failed Polish citizens, they have failed Hungarian citizens. They were set up post-World War II to protect democracy, the rule of law and human rights against member states going in an authoritarian direction. So from our point of view, essentially, supranational institutions have failed us. Why have they failed us? Because they think you can dialogue a way out of dismantling the rule of law and democracy. We are dealing with organized crime type groups. They don't care if you produce toothless reports every year. They simply wouldn't care less. This is why we keep losing, and this is why we keep seeing essentially the situation worsening. In 2021, listen to this, we have one EU member state which is no longer a democracy according to democracy experts. That's it. We have a member state structurally, fundamentally in violation of basic membership conditions. And yet this non-democratic state is defining our EU rights and obligations. It is at the table. There is another country, I'm afraid, Poland is on the way of joining this club of authoritarian countries. So it's just a matter of time. In Poland, actually, you could argue that judicial independence is as good as dead, structurally speaking. We have many brave Polish judges, many brave Polish prosecutors, but you shouldn't have a system where judges and prosecutors have to be brave just for doing their jobs. This is just not acceptable. So essentially, long story short, because the EU institutions and the Council of Europe institutions have largely failed us, and because they always look for excuse not to do what needs to be done, a number of us, a number of professors, essentially we have about 60 plus law professors now who have got together to create the Good Lobby Professors, which is part of the Good Lobby, an organization led and created by my friend, Professor Alberto Alemano. So the Good Lobby is all about equalizing access to power. The job of the Good Lobby Prof, in one sentence, is all about resisting, containing, and acting in the face of abuse of public power. So our goals are quite complementary. Now, what we want to do essentially is to help judges, prosecutors, but also NGOs and also national governments, which are pro-rule of law, to devise legal strategies, as Adam was explaining, to at least contain democratic and rule of law backsliding and name and shame those who should know better, name and shame those who should be doing something and are not doing something. I'm thinking first and foremost of the EU Commission and the Council. Gwendoline has perfectly explained the situation. The default position is always, what can I say in order to justify inaction? Instead of the default position is, well, when can I get started, on which legal basis? So it's just, so the toolbox has never been the issue. What is the issue is, I think, more of a political, cultural DNA. So essentially, they think that discursive methods can work, but they simply are completely naive, or they have not been paying attention to what has been happening in the past 10 years. So the Good Lobby Prof is essentially to help, but also to shame those who should know better. So if I can perhaps end there, and I'd be happy to answer more questions. And just to let you know, we have already essentially acted, even though we were set up only a few weeks ago. So we have, for instance, helped with an open letter regarding Judge Igor Tuleya. And now we're helping also, we're providing some advice regarding a Greek law on NGOs. And we're going to do also a lot of work on academic freedom, which is also under attack. Essentially, all the gatekeepers, all the guardians of democracy and the rule of law are being attacked, and we want to help them. So this is why 60 plus law professors got together to essentially find a way to channel their scholarship into action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Pech. Márta, why don't you tell us a little bit about the project, the initiative that you've been spearheading during your year at the EUI, and what kind of collaboration you've fostered already, and what more you think is also needed in this sphere of transnational civil society?
Thank you, Valerie. And also I'd like to thank all the previous speakers, because they've made very important points. And the first one is probably that I'd like to pick up as this is the rationale, the genesis of this Recharging Advocacy for Rights in Europe project is exactly a very European idea, the single market itself. So Gwendoline talked about how the single market has been understood for a very long time not to concern rule of law and human rights issues, but what we see today in the EU, that there is also a single market for bad, destructive practices that undermine the rule of law and civic space. And so to counter this, something that affects every single European citizen, even if they're not directly affected by it today, they will be affected by it tomorrow. To counter this, we need citizen action, individual citizens, but also groups of citizens coming together in the form of civil society organizations. And the previous speakers have talked about a variety of very important examples of solidarity and common action. And this Recharging Advocacy for Rights in Europe project comes out of the idea that we need more voices from individual organizations working within the member states themselves. Most often at the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, when we would take part in a Brussels-based debate, used to be physical, now it's mostly virtual, we would see colleagues from a couple of organizations from the usual countries, primarily Poland. The scope of these countries are expanding. And I always found it disturbing that how come we don't have more courageous, professional, well-equipped, eloquent civil society activists present in these Brussels-based debates. The organizations that focus their activities on the EU level are extremely important, but without voices from the national setting, we can't really have a truly transnational European sphere. And to contribute to this, we need to look at why is it that civil society organizations that work on extremely important issues of rule of law, of human rights, of preserving civic space are not fully able to take part in these debates. So we had thought about this very long with colleagues from the Netherlands Helsinki Committee and also from the Hertie School, Policy School, and have come up with a very ambitious project, 2 years long, which now is off the ground. It involves 25 organizations from 13 EU member states, ones that are very affected by rule of law, civic space backsliding, and others which are beginning to experience this and also are extremely alarmed by what is happening. And this project is a capacity building project. We want to equip, to strengthen the skill set of these wonderful advocates, but also we want to have us co-create something that can add to strengthening civil society space and rule of law. Both are fundamental to any kind of citizen activism. And I'm very happy to see that more and more actors are coming on board. It's not only the very important contribution from the scholars and academics or judges associations, but also from private donors and also some member states. So behind this project, which is quite large, it involves a lot of people, we have a very novel collection of donors. We're very grateful to them, private donors such as the Mercator Stiftung or the Erste Stiftung, but also the Council of Europe and the OSCE Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights is coming on board. And we also see certain member states, foreign ministries, the German, the Austrian, the Netherlands coming on board to support this very important solidarity initiative. Certainly, there have been already important countries like Norway who've recognized that democratic backsliding is not only a human rights issue. It's not only a citizen participation issue, but it's also broadly understood a security issue for us in Europe. And I think more and more actors are coming on board to support this. I'm very grateful to see all the mobilization that Adam and Laurent and Gwendoline have talked about, and they take part in it actively. But it's really important to involve more people from Bulgaria, from Romania, from Greece, from Italy, from Germany themselves. And this is what the RARE project is about.
Thank you so much, Márta. I think we've already spent half the time, not lost, we've only gained, but we've spent already half the time. I was planning to have a second round of questions, but I might actually go straight to the audience because I'm getting a lot of excellent questions already. And I want to encourage all those who haven't sent any questions on Swapcard to ask them. So we have a question we have several questions from Pep and Garrett, but I think that this one is quite good. And I will come back to you, Gwendoline, and ask, you mentioned, and Professor Pech as well mentioned that there's simply no political will right now in the council and in the commission to tackle some of the member states that have been so egregiously backsliding in rule of law. What do you think that the European Parliament and civil society can do more of in order to kind of foster this sense of political will? I mean, we have kind of turned a corner already now with Orban's Fidesz leaving the EPP. Like, the acknowledgement of the situation is definitely there, but the political will still seems to be lacking.
It's really difficult to know, because the construction of the European Union itself is done in such a way that you can manage to cut the topics and be in one tunnel and not care about the other tunnel. And what is I think for a civil society person, but also for a member of parliament like me, what is the most surprising is the capacity, for example, in council, of member states to go on doing alliances with Hungary on some topics. You will see in a newspaper coming back from a resume, coming back from a council meeting where Hungary, France, Germany, and Netherlands signed the same paper about, I don't know, an electronic problem, or, something that's got nothing to do with rule of law. And Hungary or Poland have not been put on the side of anything. There's the rule of law problem, and this seems to be a very isolated problem for the member states, and they don't seem to see how problematic it can be to go on working on all the other topics with Hungary and Poland. So as Laurent Pech said, they're still at the table, and they will still receive proposals to sign a letter, to be in a project, to ally on one topic, and all this. So this architecture, this schizophrenic way of working of the council is really what is the most problematic for us. At this precise moment, I've come a bit to the end of what I hope, and I don't really know what to say to you now, because it seems very surprising. You have discussions with permanent representations from a number of member states. You take 1 hour on the phone with them, and these high-ranking people, I'm talking about an ambassador, not anyone, and the German ambassador, the French ambassador. So that means that we are in a very high level of the state. They will tell you how grave they know the situation. And indeed that, they will make jokes about, cynical jokes, of course, but they will make cynical jokes about the fact that in 2 years, what will be still possible in Hungary. So they are very aware. And in the rule of law tunnel, they are fighting their best. I really believe that these ambassadors, for example, they are really trying to convince all the other member states that they should be harsher and do more actions and all of this, but in this tunnel. And it doesn't prevent them to work on all the other tunnels, on all the other aspects of European Union everyday rules and lives. And so I think one of the big issue is also really an awareness in the everyday life of everyday people in European Union, because you say that the awareness is there at the level of the members of parliament, at the level of a number of Brussels-minded people, yes. But I don't see in French newspapers so much concerned about what's happening in Poland and Hungary. I don't see this never in the discussions of local elected people a bit everywhere in all these member states. So I think today going into the citizens themselves and urging them to realize that they are now belonging to a union where, as Laurent Pech said, one of the member states has stepped out of democracy. We've been trying for 2 years to find the good way of saying things, so we would say hybrid and we would have all sorts of nice, bizarre periphrase to say things. But the truth is now, we all say that Hungary has just stepped out. And what does it mean for the European citizenship? So also one of the things that I have concern about is, will this topic be in the conference on the future of Europe that all the member states are getting a bit excited about, most of all France, that really wants to do a huge thing around this conference of the future of Europe. If this problematic of being a citizen of this European Union and not having the same freedoms and the same rights in Hungary and in Netherlands is not there somewhere in the agora as a topic, this will be really shocking, because for the moment this is a real issue, and it doesn't seem that it is going to be one of the issues. So that sort of thing, how it comes back in the middle of the issues and it's not dealt as a parallel problem.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Adam, we have a question from Adrian Gavin Lalaguna for you, who is asking about the future of the LGBT free zones in Poland and hate speech in Poland against LGBT people. Can you provide a comment on that?
Yes, of course I can. I think, when we are talking about like a general topic of our discussion, which is the transnational cooperation and civil society networks. So here in this case, I think it worked. It really worked because I think the pressure coming from other member states and other LGBTIQ organizations was extremely important in basically stopping this shameful process of adopting those resolutions in local communities. So at a certain point, basically, the process has been stopped. Then those organizations that have invented the scheme started not to talk about resolutions about local communities being free of LGBT ideology, but they started to promote so-called family charters. And these family charters, they were looking like a little bit like the promotion of, let's name it like non-alcoholic beer. So you are talking that you are promoting a certain type of a drink, but in fact, you would like to say a little bit different things via adoption of those charters. But already like the change of a strategy was something important, was important here in this regard. And then, what happened is that on the one hand, we had like three processes. One process is the legal one, and I had a pleasure to be part of this because I appealed some of those resolutions to administrative court. In 4 cases, I've won. In 6 other cases, I failed because administrative court found that I do not have authority to challenge that kind of resolutions because they are just of political character and not of legal character. But I think still those 4 judgments are really were very much important from the point of view of human rights. The second process was the pressure coming from other countries, not the famous resolution not only famous resolution by the European Parliament, but also a great report by the Council of Regional and Local Authorities about those resolutions. And I think this report is really comprehensive and detailed concerning the threat which is coming from those resolutions. And the third aspect is the transnational cooperation by twin cities or by sister cities. So there were some cities that said, we are not going to cooperate with you if you will stick to those resolutions. And some of the cities have realized that it is simply wrong from the point of view of their development, but also some of them have received threats that they will not get any funding from Norway and also from the EU if those resolutions are kept. And can you imagine that just last week, Kraśnik, one of the cities in Eastern Poland, has decided to annul a resolution. So there was an official voting in the local council saying, no, we are much more interested in funding for our projects than in keeping this regime. So in my opinion, it is a question of time. In my opinion, basically, we should just continue these actions. And I think that sooner or later, we'll get rid of those resolutions, either by using legal means or maybe by that kind of EU funding and Norwegian funds funding schemes. And also, I think at a certain point, in my opinion, the government, because government has always in its hands a possibility to annul those resolutions, because under the Polish law, the regional governor, who is the representative of the government in the regions, has always a right to annul that kind of legal resolutions. This competence has not been used because of political reasons, but I think that we should simply create this pressure in order to freeze those resolutions and for sure not to adopt the new one and to annul the existing one. So I hope that in future we'll get rid of them thanks to this international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bodnar, and thank you to Adrian for the excellent question. Professor Pech, I want to ask you, as you are coming up with the strategies for the Good Lobby Profs and deciding what kind of actions and what public statements to make, what arguments do you find most compelling to convince people who may not be from Poland or Hungary, who may not see that backsliding in some of these EU countries also affects them? I mean, you mentioned, writing letters of support for certain judges, but how do you conceive of the messaging to get people who may not normally be paying attention to these issues in the same way you are to care?
Very good question, very difficult question, Valerie. But actually, the primary aim of the Good Lobby Prof is more technical, high-level expertise to be provided to judges, prosecutors, academics, NGOs. So we don't really aim to publicly, do some outreach to explain why should we care about the rule of law, why should we care about democracy. That is being done actually by other organizations. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel here. The Good Lobby Prof is more kind of providing a specialized academic expertise for those under siege, under attack, and then provide them with channels of contestation, either judicial avenues or non-judicial avenues. But the point you're raising is very important, Valerie, because essentially, yes, sometimes when I go to Poland and Hungary and I talk to journalists, and they often ask me, please explain to me in 1 minute, why should people, in the countryside should care about judicial independence? And surely there is a lot of work to be done to explain essentially why should we care about fundamental constitutional values and underlying democracies. But actually the EU has done something right for once recently by adopting a new EU funding program, thanks to the parliament mostly actually fighting for more resources to promote and explain what democracy, rule of law and human rights are about. So this is being done, but not necessarily by us. We're trying to, in fact, to do something else which has not been done, which is to provide pro bono academic expertise to those under attack, which is our main goal for the time being. And we just have to start small because our budget for the time being essentially is €0. So we all do that. I think it's important also to acknowledge and be grateful for my colleagues doing all of this pro bono. And my thanks also to Alberto for hosting us also with that, even though we didn't have yet a budget.
Thank you so much, Professor. I have a question from Edith Zbut from the Polish Academy of Sciences, who wants to ask all the panelists, but maybe I'll come to you, Márta, and then I will also ask Gwendoline for a comment on this. So she says, the Hungarian and Polish governments are tilting the playing field informally by misusing state resources in elections to undermine dissidents, judges, journalists, civil society, and the opposition via state agencies. In Hungary, this goes hand in hand with monopolizing corruption and informally capturing the state. These issues are usually not even trespassing on the radar of the EU because of its institutional shortcomings. How should this type of democratic backsliding in a deeply legalized environment be addressed, in which member states are not willing to sanction each other? Just an easy one for you.
Yeah, this is quite a complex question, and I think that this is basically the theme of at least this panel, if not others. I can't answer the whole spectrum of this, but what I can say is that it's really important, as your previous question also highlighted, how can you get citizens to care? If citizens themselves don't care about having their tax euros stolen, privatized in a completely concealed and transparent manner in a completely other member states, then I think we have a very lost cause. But this is not the case. So citizens, I think, are upset if you ask them. Local citizens also. The previous question was about how can you convey something so complex and so legally, technically dry as the rule of law to somebody. Well, if you want to get a building permit and the local authorities prefer giving it to friends of oligarchs or friends of politicians, and you want to contest this refusal decision, and you cannot go to an independent court who will impartially hear your case, then you very quickly understand what it's like when rule of law is lost, or when you cannot even go to demonstrate. As in Hungary, it's been over 175 days now that there's a total ban on demonstrations. You can't demonstrate for better, more equal treatment in terms of vaccine or vaccine passports or vaccine certificates. There is no way to express publicly discontent or proposals in a public visible setting. And so this, I think, is very clear. Once there's a breakdown in one member state, because of the way the EU is construed, others will also feel the impact. And it's not going to be tomorrow maybe, but it is a gradual process that undermines. It is very often, as Adam Bodnar said, international pressure helped to scale back certain outrageous incidents, but has it really turned around the underlying fundamental destruction that is happening? That's why I think we need local involvement and long-term investment. Long-term investment also means making citizens themselves capable of understanding these concepts. So I'm very much in favor of what the Commission is also proposing, to build a rule of law culture, to see what's being done. Citizen education, civic education, there is hardly anything of it in Hungary. How can we look at the future and see future generations standing up for democracy and their own participation rights if they don't hear about it in most of the schools? But also we need to do rapid action too. And this is what I think the good lobby profs are about too. But we need litigation. We need lawyers on the ground to help those people who are being affected, whose rights are being trampled on by rule of law breakdown. So there is very important role for beyond the prevention, beyond the education measures, for also lawyers, litigation, strategic litigation, and also widespread legal services to everybody. This will not fix the institutional political issues, but if we have more of a demand on the ground, certainly politics will have to respond to that.
Thank you, Márta. Gwendoline, would you like to comment on that question as well?
Yes. In fact, on these topics, I would a bit disagree with the question, because I find that some of these topics are, in fact, the ones where you do manage to have a bit of a more large concern. Of course, whatever concerns the way opposition parties are treated or the democratic stuff, it's always very difficult for me to explain the constitutional changes, the new rules of organization of elections in Hungary and all of this. As a rapporteur on Hungary, there indeed our political systems are so different. In fact, a lot of political systems are not that democratic. I mean, not everywhere do you have proportionality and very good elections. transparency in election and all this. So this is not an easy one. But for example, the media issue and the captation, the total captation of media in Hungary is now something that has really made it through. My short little speaking time in plenary when I stated all the media that were killed these last years in Hungary, bought by friends of Viktor Orban, oligarchs, friends of Viktor Orban, is one of those that had the most success. And I hear about when I don't hear anything about everything that I say in plenary usually, because this is really something that is frightening to people, and this goes through. It also, of course, people are very corporate. So when you attack journalists, the good aspect of it is the journalists in other member states will talk about it because it's their own world, and so they are more maybe inclined of being worried that when it's civil society actors. The same on the misuse of money. This is really becoming something that annoys people. The idea, and this is getting through too, that, the Hungarian government has been using money in a very untransparent and for only a few people, and it's not going directly to the people. And this is our European money and our European good. So we need to be careful about it. And the same about corruption. The corruption is something that really is getting on the staff, at the staff level, once again, in the ambassadors and all this, they are really annoyed with the corruption aspect. So these are things where we can more work. And I think that if we can give a little positive note, it would be unfair to say that all member states are equal. I mean, some member states today, like Netherlands, like Finland, a few of them are really starting to become really annoyed with the situation, are really starting to say, I don't want my money to be misused, and also putting efforts to help on the ground and trying to tackle the issue. So we have a bit of hope on this in a certain number of things. And the same, I mean, there's the relaunch plans coming in from the member states. So member states were asked to do a plan to have the money coming from the recovery fund to relaunch the economical situation in their countries after the sanitary crisis. And we had a lot of rumors coming from Hungary that they would be a big part of that money going to foundation. They have just created new trusts that are very non-transparent, that are dealing with the university. They have been basically privatizing the university in these last months, and we had heard that the money would go there. The rumor came back and came back and came back, and then at one moment it seemed we had some leaks from the Commission that it would be good to put a bit of pressure on the Commission. So we did a letter, a few members of Parliament, to Ursula von der Leyen herself, saying it is not admissible that some of the recovery money will be used for these untransparent trusts that are organizing the universities in Hungary. And this had effect. For the first time, we had a quick effect. There was a lot of noise made in the Commission, and we know they were annoyed with our letter, and it came very high. And also, Hungarian, it seems, as with come back on this idea, is his understanding that they won't manage to go through. So from time to time, when it's on a very money issue, we do manage to get a bit of a victory. It's not often, but it does happen from time to time.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have almost only 5 minutes left. The panelists just passing very fast. I want to read a statement that comes from Tigran Karapetyan from the Council of Europe, who writes in that the Council of Europe co-funded the RARE initiative because it believes that stronger civil society organizations can contribute to better implementation of human rights standards in their home countries. Human rights NGOs are a key partner and a target group for the Council of Europe in its cooperation programming, standard setting, and monitoring efforts. Our cooperation with civil society have produced stronger, more effective monitoring mechanisms over human rights implementation in member states, better capacities to analyze and make recommendations for improvements. We have numerous successful experiences of cooperating with civil society, as a number of member states in a number of member states, and would like also to share this experience and strengthen such interaction in other Council of Europe member states by supporting initiatives such as human rights groups, such as Recharging Advocacy for Rights in Europe program, which aims to strengthen human rights NGOs in the European Union. We are trying to do just that. Thank you, Tigran, for writing in. And I'm getting so many questions. There's a question for Adam. The EC often asks about the risks of backfiring if it risks raising public critics against governments of Poland and Hungary, that this would only fuel anti-EU rhetoric. Do you have a reaction to this concern? And this question is sent in solidarity by Natasha Kazarchinan.
Thank you. This argument is quite often presented that, if Commission does something strong, then it will backfire. But I think, anybody who is making that kind of a statement should look into statistics and polls when Timmermans was active as the Vice President of the Commission. He was attacked so many times. He was portrayed in a very negative way in the Polish press. He was presented as a major enemy of Poland for all his actions concerning judicial independence. And then if you look into polls, the level of support for European integration, all the time, 75% of the trust, and the level of trust to the Commission, 65-70%. I think the question is, who is using this argument? Maybe it is the Polish government that is using this argument, because it is a very good argument for them, because it means Commission do not touch it, because otherwise you will lose legitimacy. And simply, Commission should simply do its job and should be guardian of treaties, and that's it. And if I may, just short sentence on the question by Edith is good. I would like just to say just one thing. Use of state resources is made in order to undermine freedom of speech. Most probably you have heard about this recent transaction of the purchase by PKN Orlen, oil giant of the Polish 20 regional titles. And my big question to the European Union is such: how on earth is it possible to organize free and fair elections to the European Parliament in 2024 when you will not have a freedom of speech landscape in 2 member states of the European Union? I think that should be the question for the European Union and for the Commission for upcoming 2 years. It is not the issue outside of the competences of the EU. It is because of the elections to the European Parliament.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Professor Pech, I have received a question from Mark Dempsey 3 times, so I must ask it. What can Charles Michel do on this issue?
Well, he could speak out and stop essentially not mentioning inconvenient facts, such as the fact that Hungary is no longer a democracy, instead of speaking out in actually supporting whatever positions the Hungarian government is taking. So they should really say things how they are, and they should stop using diplomatic language. Really, this is... He has been going on for too long. But perhaps, if I may say, he's not really a key actor anyway. So if I had one recommendation to do, it would be for the pro-rule of law national governments to start bringing infringement actions. We cannot expect the guardian of the treaty to do his job. I mean, they've just given up on being the guardian of the treaties. They're more interested in publishing reports these days than bringing infringement actions. So we need the Dutch, Finnish, Swedish, Belgian, all the friends of the rule of law to bring infringement actions. I offer my services pro bono. I have a list of 15 infringement actions which could be initiated against Polish and Hungarian governments. I'll do this. It will take me just a couple of weeks to bring the files together. So this is my offer of service pro bono for the day.
Wow. Let's see if you will get some takers. Unfortunately, Márta, can I ask you in 20 seconds to say what can we expect from the RARE initiative, and then we will close.
The RARE initiative will equip human rights advocates to be very eloquent, proud Europeans, and calling out everybody to join them in solidarity to defend basic European values. We need democracy, and we need to make ourselves proud of the EU, and this is the way to do it.
Thank you very much, Márta. Thank you to all of the panelists. I think this has been a really interesting discussion. I'm very honored to have moderated it, and stay tuned for more. Have a wonderful rest of the State of the Union conference event. Thank you very much. Goodbye.